Vernomatic Productions.
Hi, this is Rik Emmett of Triumph, and you're listening to Metal Mayhem ROC with John the Vernomatic Verno and Metal Wolf.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are go.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC, a proud member of the Pantheon podcast team.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. As always, Thursday nights, new content drops. On tonight's show, we're joined by Rik Emmett from Canada's Triumph. Rik just released a brand new memoir called Lay It on the Line, a backstage pass to rock, adventure, conflict, and triumph. Tells the story about the start of the band Triumph, their rise to international and American success, and unfortunately, the demise of the band back in the late 80s. He shares stories about him and Gil Moore and Mike Levin, how they became like the Three Musketeers, and that was the bond that the band really shared, and what happened that caused resentment and anger for them not to talk for 20 years. So we discussed that. They talk about the band's reunion in 2008, the reunion shows in Sweden and Rocklahoma. Shares a cool story about the band, the limo driver, and an overzealous state trooper in Oklahoma. Tells the story about the day that they played on the Heavy Metal Day at the US Festival and how he was like, how am I going to do a guitar solo with Eddie Van Halen backstage going to be playing later? But he did just fine. Let's see. Also, cool stories about, down in Jersey. This is a cool one about how they opened up the new Meadowlands hockey arena. It was the first concert there. And the night before, the Islanders won the Stanley Cup, and fucking Northern Jersey was just on fire. So he shares those stories, plus tons more. So that's coming up in just a second. Rik Emmett, and talking about his brand new book. But, if you missed some of our more recent episodes, go up to the metalmayhemroc.com website. Check the archive drop-down box. Last week, we had Tommy Victor of Prong. A couple weeks before then, we had Brittany Chapman, the daughter of Paul Chapman from UFO. Adam Dubin, the metal filmmaker. So there's tons of them up there. And I invite you to check out our YouTube channel where we post other interviews with other bands that don't make it onto the podcast. So there's a lot going on up around here. Again, metalmayhemroc.com website. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. You'll get notifications on all of this. All right, enough of me. Let's get into this. We appreciate you listening. So here we go. Rik Emmett, Triumph. For my co-host, Metal Walt, I'm the Vernomatic. This is Metal Mayhem ROC. Okay, well, let's get into it. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, today's guest is a killer songwriter, guitarist, musician, producer. He's a grandfather, a husband, a dad, and one hell of a hockey fan. He's here to talk about his brand new book, Lay It on the Line, a backstage pass to rockstar, adventure, conflict, and triumph. From the band Triumph, Rik Emmett. Rik, welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. How are you?
Thank you. Yes, it's great to be here.
I'm sitting in Rochester, New York. We're about 50 miles across Lake Ontario to downtown Toronto. I would like to introduce you to my co-host. He's down in New Jersey. He goes by the name of Metal Walt.
Hey, Rik, Metal Wolf from New Jersey. How are you? I'm not as close. I would need a big, long ride up the New York State Thruway all the way up to Syracuse, make a left, and keep going for about 4 hours.
Yeah, I know where these things are, guys. I've played these places many, many times. In fact, like Rochester, we used to do this. Triumph used to go across the top of New York State and do all the war memorials. There was one in Buffalo, then there was one in Rochester, and then one in Syracuse, right? The war memorial auditoriums. And of course, Jersey, oh man, I have a funny story about Jersey. We can tell it later in the show, but Yeah, and I'll try to figure out how to tell it in public terms, because it crosses the line a little bit. But
love it. I love it.
Actually, 2 stories about playing New Jersey. But okay, on we go.
Well, we'll get to that when we take our walk down heavy metal history lane. All right, so Rik, why the memoir now? Is it just to close the career? Tell us about it.
Well, I retired from the road back in about 2018, and then COVID came and retired everybody else for a while. But my timing was excellent to get off the road. And it just seemed like the Triumph had done the documentary, the Rock and Roll Machine documentary that Banger Films did. And I realized that, truth is this thing that's a perspective. Everybody's got their own truth, and the documentary certainly had one. That was one that those guys decided to tell, when I'm saying Banger Films. But there were some things where I thought, well, my life has been a lot more complicated than just being in this rock band. Then, your question is an interesting one from the point of view of, like, why even bother? Like, I was just reading a thing this morning. Mick Jagger says, I'm never writing a memoir. I'm down, I live so that I'm worried about what's coming in the future and what I'm doing today. I'm not interested in the past. I'm going to move on. And I get that. I totally get that. But I think your question sort of framed it. There's chapters that you come to the end of and you close the door and then you move on. But sometimes the closing of the door is, for me, I'm a very writerly literate kind of guy. And I felt like, no, I need to write this. I need to find the right words. I need to figure out how I want to say it. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to try and write it well so that it would be something that, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren might pick it up and read it and go, Grandpa, what a character he was, So that there's a kind of memorializing that you're leaving a legacy, all of those kinds of things. But part of it, too, is you just want to set the record straight, That's part of it, too.
And Rik, it's interesting in the book, like, you cover off on all of your typical chapters, what it was growing up in your family and your youthful years, how you learned to become a musician, the Triumph years, the post-Triumph years, back to Triumph years, the college professor, all that other stuff. But what I found interesting is there's a big equal focus on not just the music, but sort of the trade-off and the stresses that came with it, right? So you describe yourself as a rock star, yet I'll quote the book. You describe making choices for commercial and not musical success, the friction of having to make career choices versus prioritizing family needs, that search for personal balance, and learning to say no.
Yeah. Well, obviously my personal truths that I arrived at living the kind of life that I did, but one of them was that I ended up teaching as a college professor for a long time, and I taught music business, I taught songwriting, and I taught career development, and all of these kinds of things. Helped kids. You'd sort of function like a mentor, helping them produce their records, but also, trying to give them advice about, how you're going to live your life and make choices. And of course, young folks, they have a lot of idealism. And as an artist, I'm 70 years old now. I still have some. I don't have as much as I used to, don't have anywhere near the ambition that I used to. But, I still have that sense of, if life's going to work, you got to kind of, light some candles and hold them up in the darkness. Like, there's got to be something that gives you a sense of purpose. So, everything I did was like that. And of course, the big thing is I was in a band called Triumph, and it took me a few years to figure it out. But, why did they call the band Triumph? I think Mike and Jill really had no idea. They just kind of thought it was cool, like a motorcycle, like a sports car. Triumph. Yeah, this is going to be great. And I kind of went, no, it's got to stand for something. If you're going to call it Triumph. So the whole thing of Triumph becoming a band that had songs of like inspiration and motivation and self-empowerment and all of those kinds of, long before it was really a meme that existed in the world, Triumph was making tunes like that. And it made it so that it wasn't just guys, in heavy metal, jackets with buttons all over them and crests, and but we had women coming to shows now. So like that kind of opinion about the music that we made, it crossed over borders and boundaries, and I was very much that kind of a guy. I didn't want to just be locked into one kind of a thing, you know? So, that's my story.
There's a chapter in the book called the Triumph chapter, like duh, but, you know, you assume Rik Emmett's doing a memoir, right? This is going to be 95% about Triumph, and it actually isn't. Like, the Triumph chapter is only, I think, about 29 pages out of 280. So there's a whole lot more to your life than just Triumph, as it was stated in the book, of course.
Yes, and I appreciate you pointing that out, and that's the truth of it. And I mean, the thing too is, like, the biggest part, and the book makes this point very clear, the biggest part of my life was creativity, and creativity led me to Triumph, and that was a chapter in my life. But that creativity is something that's still ongoing, you know, like, even to sit here now and just do an interview, this is a kind of a creative act, and it's always something that I've found interesting and fun to do. I loved going into school and doing lectures. I loved prepping for classes because it was creative work. So, I mean, I'm still writing guitar pieces and going to be making new albums or recording guitar fingerstyle stuff that's kind of jazzy, you know. So here I am on a metal show and I'm talking about, you know, jazz guitar pieces. But that's kind of the guy that I am, and that's the kind of creative life that I always really wanted. I wanted to be able to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know. I mean, in my life, there's no more important guitar player than, say, Ritchie Blackmore. Like, he was one of my heroes at a time of my life, and that was the beginnings of metal, and so there is metal in my soul. There's no question that that's a part of who I am. Jimmy Page, there was metal in Zeppelin. They weren't all metal, but you know, there was a fair bit of it there. But of course, when we played at the S Festival, which is one of the stories that I tell in the book, there were all these other bands like Judas Priest and you know, and they get up on stage and they're wearing leather and studs and it's 90 degrees in the shade. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to, you know, I'm glad I'm not that kind of a metal guy. You know, I prefer to be this kind of a metal guy wearing a track shirt, you know. Anyhow.
Quick history. I went to school in Toronto. I graduated high school in 1986. I went to school up at Trevis Institute of Recording Arts. And so here it is. I'm 19 years old, Toronto, Ontario, 1986, going to the Gasworks, going to Massey Hall. You said a quote about Triumph that it was, first of all, you came into Mike and Gil's band, and it was really Gil's band. And how many other bands have a singer as a drummer? You really weren't the stereotypical front man. So tell us about the dynamics of writing with these guys in, because you're the writing force.
Well, you know, Gil was a bit of a writer too when I first joined, and he definitely felt like it was something that he wanted to do. So in the first few albums, and there was a concerted effort. Mike was kind of functioning as the record producer. He knew more about the studio than Gil or I did, and Mike would sort of diplomatically say, okay, well, we'll have a Rik song, then we'll have a Gil song, then we'll have a Rik song, then we'll have a Gil song, and 50-50, split the lead vocals. And of course, I liked it. To be in a band where you have another singer, it's great. You don't have to rip your throat out singing all night long. You work hard, but then you get a break. You know, so that was a nice way for the band to be able to kind of preserve itself, basically, over the course of a long, you know, tour, a long career. But I think what happened was by about the third album, the Just a Game album, the songs Lay It on the Line and Hold On became pretty popular at radio. They were kind of the break across. We started to get on AM radio a little bit. So those things started to happen, and I was the vocalist on those songs. And I think it sort of showed that there was an appetite from the general public that if you wanted to break the band wider and become, you know, bigger and more popular, and certainly the record company at the time, RCA, that was their feeling. Their feeling was, hey, get the blonde guy to sing the songs, you know, which Mike and Gil weren't keen on when that went down. But the other side of that thing, and another, you know, this facet to your question, Mike and Gil were, as the band started to develop and become more and more successful, they were really having to spend a lot of time and energy being managers. They were having to kind of function as coordinating booking agents and coordinating the marketing and working with the record company. And Mike understood radio promotion way better than most radio promotion guys did. He just had a knack for it. He had a hunger and an ambition for it. Whereas Gil, when it came to large scale productions, honestly, there was nobody in a rock band on the face of the earth that had the level of understanding that Gil did. Gil knew literally how to take PA systems apart and put them back together, lighting systems, genie lift towers. He understood all that. And Gil was the kind of guy that loved doing shit like, I'll cut a deal with a truck driver and we'll buy a truck. And we'll own our own truck. So in the early days of the band, we had a tractor trailer. We were pulling up to the gas works with a tractor trailer truck. And people were going, what is this band? Like, in the documentary, Larry Gowan talks about the band carrying itself above all the other bands, because that was kind of Gil's attitude that, Mike, he adopted it really quickly and easily. The two of them had a mindset that was like, no, this is what this band's going to be. We're going to rule the world, and, we're going to do it our way. So that was like, I was junior partner, but then, I was writing the songs that were starting to happen. I went, oh, this is my role. This is what I can contribute. This is who I can be. But of course, as time goes on, egos get in the way, and, everybody wants to be a rock star once you have a taste of it,
You mentioned that, and I've read somewhere, I'm not sure where, that when the band came around in the early mid-70s, you were taking a little bit of like the theatrics of Cooper and Kiss and this and that. Did the dual writing pull from your love of the Beatles, where they all sang? Kiss, you had Gene and Paul, all four of them singing. It almost expanded the brand. And did those bands that I just mentioned have anything to do with both of you writing and singing?
Oh, absolutely. I think in the very early stages of the band, when we were just a bar band, we were playing a lot. We had a couple of Led Zeppelin medleys. We had a Jimi Hendrix medley. We had a Deep Purple medley. So the common ground was really those bands. But if you sort of looked a little deeper and beyond it to each guy's taste, there was a common ground. Like Gil loved Grand Funk, and he loved Mark Farner, and he just loved the way that guy sang and stuff. And you could hear it in his voice. Gil loved Bad Company and Paul Rogers. And that bluesy kind of quality is something that Gil, he gravitated towards. And when he wrote, you'd hear it in the stuff that he did. I wasn't as bluesy. I had blues, it's not like I hadn't cut my teeth listening to, the English guitar players that sort of reinvented American blues and given it back to a younger generation. And so then through, Beck and Page and Clapton, we were finding our way back to, Albert King and the Cotton Blues Band and that Mike Bloomfield. Like, there was stuff that I got to hear because of the group of musicians I was with. So that was common ground for me and Gil. Like, I could speak that language, and musically I liked to play it there. I didn't want to have to stay there because you mentioned the Beatles. I mean, I was huge about the Beatles. I liked vocal bands in the end more than I liked, hard rock bands that were about groove. I liked tunes. I liked songs. I liked, and I eventually got to a progressive period in my life. I was listening to Yes, King Crimson and Gentle Giants and, Return to Forever. And, my brain was expanding in ways I don't think Gil and Mike ever really got there. They were pretty happy with the roots they had.
I wouldn't call some of your classic, hold on, lay it on the line, sappy, but they were more singing rather than the hard rock. And you're right, Gil handled some of that early stuff, the hard, earlier stuff.
Yeah, well, the lights go down. Yeah, but even earlier than that, Street Fighter, and there were riff rock tunes that he'd write a riff, and he'd sing it into his dictaphone. So it'd be like, he would say, "Here's the song I've been working on," and I would listen to this little tape that would be going like, na 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 na. I go, yeah, it sounds like Deep Purple. It's good, Yeah, I can work on that. We'll work it up. And so he was that kind of a guy that he liked that kind of riff rocking stuff. And hey, that was right up my alley. I mean, I said earlier, Blackmore was kind of one of Deep Purple. Like, wow, they blew my mind. I thought that was the greatest rock band ever. When I was a teenager, you were living in in Toronto and going to Trebas in your era. Back in my era, I would do things like climb the car and I would drive to Detroit to see Hendrix, or go up to Montreal to see Deep Purple. Like I'd get on the train and I'd go on up to Montreal to see Deep Purple play at the Montreal Forum. And I just thought they were the greatest rock band on the planet Earth, But you're a teenager, right? That like you're discovering the world.
Well, talk to this guy. Metal Walt's a huge Purple head. You guys should.
I'm 53 and I love Deep Purple, and I didn't even got a chance to see them till 1991 when they had Joe Lynn Turner in the band. But still,
oh man, yeah,
still,
I saw them. I saw them at St. Lawrence Market in Toronto one time, and Ian Gillan was not in a happy mood, and Blackmore was even worse, like foul black mood, and he had about 6 or 7 strats, and he would be playing one, and he just beat the shit out of it, like the whammy bar, and eventually he would throw it down on the ground and be kicking it and stomping on it and playing the whammy bar with his foot, and a roadie would scurry out and bring him a new one, and Richie had thrown it over his shoulder and plugging it, and the one that was on the floor with parts flying off it, the roadie would grab it and run it back and start trying to reassemble it. And there were about 6 or 7 of these guitars that were in a constant stream from Richie's chest down to the floor, over to the roadie's bench, back onto the top of the amp, and Richie was just destroying these guitars. And it was one of the greatest nights of my life. I go, oh, this is great,
That is awesome. That is a great story. Rik, I was thinking about this too. Early in the book, you use the words it and play that become an important part of who you are as a person and your persona as an artist. And I guess in a sense, as you were describing the experience from MCA and the RCA lawsuit, and in a way, that's when you became a bit, let's say, disenfranchised from, let's say, what you call the Three Musketeers and the big rock and roll machine. And that's in a way where you almost sort of mentally started planning your exit from Triumph, correct? And it wasn't because it was no longer about like why you signed up to be a musician to begin with, right?
Yeah. And I think for you to describe it as saying that I was planning my exit, like that would be way too, that's not what was happening. Certainly what was happening was I was considering, what if I had to leave? Like, what if this, what if this keeps going the way that it's going? Like, how would I get out of it? So it was a much fuzzier, grayer cloud than having like, all right, I've got to plan my exit. Like, even when it got right down to the end in 87, 88, I was still feeling like, is there some way that I can rescue it? Is there some way we can save this? Like, how might I be able to reinvent it? But I couldn't see a way to do it. But as I mentioned earlier, this whole thing about feeling constricted or blocked, I don't mind it when the idea is to say, okay, it is going to be creative play. That's what it's going to be. And that's going to be the priority all the way down the line in everything that we do. And in Triumph, one of the best things about the band was that we shared this sense of humor. The 3 guys, it was like, isn't this surreal? This is bizarre that our lives are like this. Isn't this great? So we always had a kind of a lightheartedness within this, tremendously serious business that you've got record contracts and you've got merchandising deals and you've got tours that you've got to go out and play on, and they seem like they're never going to end. There's all of this stuff that's going on that locks you into a box. But if you feel like, well, there's lots of air holes, just somebody put a vent in the roof, I'm all right. I'm not going to suffocate here. But I would feel it if the focus was no longer about that creative play, the fun we're going to have. We're going to go in the studio. We're going to have songs and make records and we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be great. It's going to be play. We're going to play. And I live for that. So, as a musician, I want that moment where I'm not even in my own head anymore. I'm inside the music and I'm playing, and I'm not sure that Gil and Mike had the same, religious, spiritual experience that I had when it came to, maybe they did, but maybe the business maybe it hammered it out of them after a while. I'm not sure. We had our moments, and some of them were glorious.
Hey, Rik, on that point too, and I love this about your book. When you get away from the musical side, there's a lot of emphasis on family in your book. I mean, you give the biggest accolades to your wife of 47 years, Jeanette. I mean, your 4 kids, your grandkids now. There's even a funny line in there where I think something about it took maybe 6 or 7 years of your career before your dad finally said, I guess this music thing's working out for you, okay? But ultimately, when, family's a big thing for you, but ultimately when it did come time to, let's say, resurrect Triumph for Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma, it was your brother Russell who was the catalyst to kind of say, all right, Rik, it's time to give up the ghost here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that when Triumph came apart, and when I left it, there was a lot of negativity and there was a lot of bad blood. And then lawyers argued with lawyers for years and years and years. And it took me, 7 or 8 years to get a settlement. And even then, it was, no one's ever happy when there's a divorce settlement. It's like, then I carried around resentments and anger and a lot of negativity. And so my brother, he got cancer and it was stage 3.5, stage 4, but he was the one that sort of sat me down, and we're having one of those conversations that you have, which is putting your affairs in order, all of these kinds of things. And he said, you carry around a lot of baggage, and you should really try to fix it. And I go, I thought we were talking about you.
Yeah.
I didn't think we're talking about me. I don't think it's fair to turn this around on me. He goes, this is kind of about me too, because I want you to try and do this for me. This is something from a legacy point of view. I'd really like to see you, because my brother Russell was as big a Triumph fan as there ever was. Nobody liked it more than him, that he would get a limo sent to his house to pick him up and take him down to a gig at Maple Leaf Gardens or, down in Buffalo or whatever. And he loved it. And he and I we were very, very close. I mean, there's pictures in the book where you can see we played in softball leagues together and we were tight. And so when he made the request, I went, well, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this for him. And I think Mike and Gil appreciated the fact that here wasn't this, son of a bitch guy that had fought with them for years coming back. Here was this guy that was coming back because he had a younger brother that was in a bad place that was making this happen for Mike and Gil. Like, we were all going to benefit from this. So Russell was coming from the right place for the right reasons. And that made it easier for us to sort of say, okay, put down your weapons. Let's peace.
Rik, let me ask you, what were you angry at? What were you resenting? The fact that the Musketeers, that bond you guys had, was being broken? Was it the fact that you're finally like a different stage of your life, 87, 88? I don't know what the exact age was, maybe late 30s. And you're like, man, I'm really turning into a real adult. Was it that bond was not there? What was the anger and resentment?
I was 34, 35, 88. I'm born in 53. So, 35 years old. And part of it was that, to answer your question about, what was the big thing emotionally behind the anger, I think it was because I felt like the spirit of the band, the reason for the band, the heart of the band had been betrayed. And so I felt there was a betrayal there. And I look back on it now and I realize, well, nobody was getting any younger. Everybody had families and kids. And in fact, Gil, his marriage was dissolving and coming apart. His dad died, and that put him in a really bad place. And he'll admit, he'll say, hey, I wasn't even in my right mind. And he wasn't. He was making decisions. And part of it was, they were business decisions that, I absolutely 100% didn't agree with, but I would get outvoted. And so there was a frustration there that what I considered to be common sense reason was not being listened to. There were business practices that I thought, man, this is kind of going beyond the pale here. Like I can't live, So I felt like I don't have a choice here. I've got to give my notice, and this is going to be horrible because the financial implications, the consequences are going to be disastrous. But, at a certain point, and maybe I say this in the book, I can't remember, but it's not about money anymore. There's certain decisions you make in your life, and they can't be about money. If you're always making your decisions based on money, then, I think you're betraying the spirit of what the best stuff of life is supposed to be about, which is, play and music and love and family and all of these other kinds of things. So,
what'd you think about when Phil X joined the band briefly? And nothing against Phil, because he's great in his own work, but to come into Triumph, he even admitted it in the documentary. It's like, what am I doing here? I wouldn't even want to see me. What was your take on that whole period?
Well, there was a guy named Jim Norris who used to run a Canadian Musician magazine. He put together a guitar seminar, and I think it would have been 89, maybe the year after, and Phil had just come into the thing, and Phil was going to be at this guitar workshop thing too. So I was going to be there, and Jim said to me, "Are you okay with this?" I said, "I'm fine, totally fine with it. Yes, absolutely, no problem." And when we got there, I went up to Phil and I shook his hand and I said, "Phil, there are only two guys on the planet Earth that know what you're stepping. I know what you've stepped into, and you know what you're in now."
Yeah.
And so I have, complete respect for you, and you have I wish you absolutely the best of luck, because only I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I go, it's not going to be easy, man. But he's a good guy, Phil. He's a tremendous guitar player. He's an unbelievably great guitar player. But I think that's a tough thing, the spirit of Triumph embodied in the songs that I wrote and the songs that I sang. Clearly, he was not going to be able to fill that void, and there's very. I don't say this to be self-aggrandizing, but I just think it's a really, how many guitar players that are, world-class rock guitar players sing the way that I sing? Hardly any. How many singers that sing the way that I sing can play guitar at the level that I play it? Like very, very few. So that was, why would RCA want to sign the band to a record deal? Because they go, hey, this is a kind of a unique talent here. I think we want to give this guy a chance to be making records. He deserves the opportunity to do it. So there's not a lot of folks like that. You might find in any big town, you might find two or three that are, that are capable on that level, singer, guitar player. But now there's a third element. How are they at writing tunes? Because you got to be a songwriter too, because that's part of that's the fuel that drives the industry on any level, Like I just watched the thing of the Everly Brothers the other night, and there was a quote from Chet Ack, and somebody asked him and said, "Hey, Chet, what is the Nashville sound? What is that sound?" And Chet puts his hand down into his pockets and he jingles his coins, and he goes, "You hear that? That's the Nashville sound." And the truth of the music business, no matter what kind of music you play, you got to sell records. You got to sell tickets, And I think that was a hard thing for Triumph to have to try and replace. Man, dare I say it, probably impossible, because I was the history there. Hold On, Land on the Line, Magic Power, Fight the Good Fight, Never Surrender. Like that, those were the evergreen tunes. I wrote every one of them, you know.
The reason they were so great was because it was only you could sing it, because you put so much of Rik Emmett into it. Even just watching those videos, just the look of your face and your eyes, it's like, forget it, man. Hold On is timeless.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I am going to, I'm going to do a shout out to a few folks. Like, for example, Tommy Shaw would have been a great guy because he could have sung and played. Like, Tommy he's capable of, but there aren't that many, you can kind of, one hand, like there's not that many guys that can sing that high, hit those notes. The guy in Zebra, I can't remember his name offhand.
Randy Jackson.
Yeah, there's your man. Like that guy could have done it, but he had his own thing. Why would he want to leave the Zebra thing to come over and join Triumph?
So you're saying you have to be a thin white guy with blonde hair? That's the prerequisite?
No. I would definitely not. If they could have found a really hip chick that like a female guitar player that it might have worked. But by the time a female guitarist has reached that level, she's already got her own record deal. She's already happy. She's not going to leave her thing to come over and join Triumph,
And Rick, you're also forgetting to call out one of your other best attributes, which you mentioned in the book is about, and hopefully I could say this word right, that you are dextro-sinistral.
That's it. Yeah, dextro-sinistral, yes. Yeah.
So tell us what that means.
Okay, so I'm naturally left-handed. So in the sense that gross motor control, if I was going to hammer a nail, I would use my left hand. If I was going to throw a baseball, whatever, left hand. But if I'm going to write with a pen, I use my right hand. So fine motor control was my right hand. When I picked up a fork to eat, I would use my right hand. So my brain kind of has both hemispheres doing different kinds of things. Now, I'm not, it's fairly unique. There are about 10 people in 100 are left-handed, and about 1 out of 10 are dextro-sinistral. But this thing that I just said about watching the Everly Brothers last night, one of the Everly Brothers was left-handed, and his father absolutely insisted that he learn how to play right-handed. And so he was a left-handed guy playing guitar that way. And they had Waddy Wachtel doing, talking about and he's a left-handed guy that plays right-handed. Like, I think Blackmore was a left-handed guy that played right-handed. Yep. It's not that uncommon because these guys, you rise quickly because you have this strong hand on the fretboard. It gives you a kind of an advantage. So, that's
it's a cool little fact. I mean, let's be honest. That was the real reason you got the big record label deal.
Yeah, look, there's something wrong with his brain. I think we should hire him. He's damaged goods. Great. I wanted to tell you a Jersey story now. Can I tell you a Jersey story?
Oh yeah. Okay, go ahead. Jersey story.
Okay.
Oh, hold on 1 second, guys. We got to take a quick little break, and when we come back, Rick could tell his cool Jersey story, and Metal Walt has his very own Jersey story, and then we're going to talk about some big festival that Triumph played and a couple other cool anecdotes about Rick's time with Triumph. We'll be right back.
Metal Mayhem ROC.
I'm Metalhead.
Metal Mayhem ROC is the home for metal from the very beginnings.
This is James DeBrett from Hellstar. You're listening to Vernomatic.
Dave Overkill from the Cleveland band Destructor. Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great.
To longtime headliners.
Hey, this is Red Beach from Whitesnake.
Hey, this is Vinny Appice from Dio, Black Sabbath, and Last in Line.
To music of today.
Hi, this is Olaf Wickstrand from Enforcer.
Hi, this is Braun from Mastodon.
You're listening to Metal Mayhem ROC.
With John the Vernomatic Burner.
Plus, we talk with producers and authors to give you behind-the-scenes info.
Hi, this is William Merwin, author of The Meaning of Metallica, Ride the Lyrics.
Greg Renoff, the author of the book Van Halen Rising. in the Ted Templeman book, A Platinum Producer's Life in Music.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Metal Mayhem ROC, a proud member of the Pantheon podcast team, giving you more to listen for. Join our community, and always remember to keep it heavy.
Okay, we're back. We're talking with Rik Emmett, his new book, Lay It on the Line, A Backstage Pass to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. Okay, Rik, you got some cool Jersey story. Let's hear it, buddy.
So we're playing the first gig, the first big rock gig ever in the Meadowlands. So the building's been built out in the middle of the swamp somewhere. And, here we come. And it's a big gig. I think we got a Japanese band called Loudness is on the bill, but Mount is on the bill. And see, I remember this gig because of Leslie. So we're backstage, and Leslie comes to me, and he's got, a voice like this. Hey, Rik, I got something for you, man. I got press. And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a guitar knob, and it's a DiMarzio guitar knob, and he puts it in my hand. It's a cream. I still have it in my collection, but it goes to 11. It's a Spinal Tap guitar knob, goes to 11. And he goes, Spinal Tap, it goes to 11. And Leslie was so clever. I was never going to forget the guy because this thing made him absolutely totally unique. And then when it was so how long are we going to let a Mountain play? I go, oh, fuck, let him play for an hour and a half. I don't give a shit. Leslie's great. Let them do whatever they want to do. Okay, so the B part of this story is we've got a guy named Jeff Crump as our road manager. And Jeff had trained under a promoter out in the Midwest, United States, and Colorado, and that neck of the woods. And he was a very officious, ball busting kind of dude, right? And so one of the things that he would routinely do is he would go out and he would count the seats, just do a rough count based on the what the promoter had given him as a seating chart. He would go out and he would count the seats in the house. And if there was a whole section of seats, it wasn't on the manifest. It wasn't on the thing. And so he calls the building manager and the promoter's rep together, and they stand there on the floor of the hall, and he goes, hey, there's a little section of seats up there that they're not even on the seating plan. Well, what is this? And the guy they look at each other, right? And the building manager goes, well, those are Frank's seats. And he goes, Frank's seats? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, Frank's the natural. And you go,
oh, man.
Because it's Jersey, and there's unions, and there's.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, somebody's got to be sort of making sure that the peace is being kept by a certain. And so you just go, oh, okay. Now, this was a fairly common, I don't want to make it sound like Jersey's all. Every place you go, there would be a couple of extra, rows of seats on the floor, and the promoter wasn't telling anybody about him until the road manager counted him and goes, oh, okay, yeah, you caught me. All right, yeah. That this kind of shit would go on all the time. But anyhow, that's why I'll never forget the Meadowlands in New Jersey.
That arena's, I don't know if you know this, the arena's still there. It's now embodied in a shopping mall, and they can't take it down. So it's like the ghost of the Meadowlands Arena lived there. That's where I saw all my first shows and everything back in the day. But Rik, I have now my story to tell you about something that happened at a Rik Emmett show at BB King's in New York City that had nothing to do with the show itself. But you're a good sense of humor guy, and you're going to love this story. Right. So it's May of 2007. We go to BB King's. We see a great show. It was awesome. I'm with two of my buddies. My one buddy who does not drink, he decided to get to the show late, and he had an empty stomach. And for the yayas, we go out and we have a couple beers afterwards. And he decides to order one of these fancy martinis. Now, the guy doesn't drink. He has nothing on his stomach. And next thing you know, we can't find him. And he's driving the car. I go find him in the bathroom in the basement. It's now midnight. And I say to him, Mark, what's wrong? Lance, I got sick. I'm throwing up here. I'm drunk. It was that martini. So next thing you know, we're like, well, give us the car keys. We'll drive home. No worries. It's a Wednesday night now, mind you. And guess what? He's driving a stick shift. And my buddy and I don't know how to drive a stick shift. So we now had to roam around the city till 4:30 in the morning on a Wednesday night for him to sober up so we could get home.
Gee.
So that will forever, ever be labeled the Rik Emmett night. And I told him I was going to talk to you, and I could tell he's probably like, fuck, he's going to bring up the story about the martini.
Everybody's got to have stories, man. Everybody's got to have a legend. And you know, your worst moments are also going to be as legendary as your best. So tell them, I appreciate that. I've had a few of those nights myself where you're calling Ralph on the great white telephone, and because you've had a little too much to drink. And did he manage to stay sober enough to catch most of the show, or did this happen?
Oh no, we saw the show sober. We went out for those couple of drinks afterwards. So it was a long day the next day. But hey, Rick, I didn't want to forget to ask you too. Going back to the reunion about Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma, I was in attendance at Rocklahoma. So I'm one of those rare guys that I was maybe a little bit too young to see Triumph, even at the Meadowlands. But I said, you know what? I got to be here. And I went down there. And of course, it was a great night. But talk a little about your experiences at Sweden Rock and Rocklahoma with the tornado.
Yeah, that was a bizarre. I mean, both of the things were kind of weird. Sweden, it was like, why were we going to Sweden? Why didn't we just play on our hometown? Why did we have to go all the way to Sweden? Well, part of it was just that was the offer that was on the table, and it was one of those offers that you couldn't refuse. And so then the agent says, well, don't just go out and play one. I can put you on the Rocklahoma bill. Do you want to play Rocklahoma? And we went, okay, well, that one we could fly our kids to, in Gil's case in particular, he wanted his kids to see him playing in a band, So, because they'd never seen him. So, Rocklahoma, the first of all, there was a tornado the night before, and it had, knocked down a few tents and moved some shit around on the site, and Lord knows what had happened. But, that was the night before. And then when we were going over there, the guy that's our limo driver, he's driving along the highway, and the state police pull him over because he was speeding in our limo. And we're in the back seat of the limo, and then the cops, he doesn't have a valid driver's license. And so the cops are going to arrest him. And then we're thinking, well, we're going to be late. Oh, we had to do a press conference before we were going to go on. So we were late for the press conference. We wanted to get there. And we started to climb out of the car, and the state trooper, typical guy in those, flat hats, the Stetsons. And he goes like, hey, boy, where do you think you're going? It's like, we got to get out of the car. He goes, you can't get out of the car. You get back in that car around the house. Oh, okay. So we have to so we're sitting in the car, going, oh, geez, what's going to happen? On the cell phones, trying to call road managers and trying to call in. So eventually, the police literally cuff the guy and take him into their car. And we have to wait for a car to come and get us, and then have to ask permission. Is it okay for us to get out of the car and change into another car? Yeah, all right, you guys can go now. But so that is my strongest memory of how it all got started. The gig itself, I remember it was a really, really hot day, and I remember Night Ranger was on before us, and I know some of the guys in the band, right? And that Jack Blades, the bass player, he was wearing leather pants, and I was thinking, Jack, not a good choice. And then literally, I'm watching from the side, and I can see they bring out one of those plastic Rubbermaid garbage pails full of ice water, and Jack would come over periodically and stick his head into the thing, and then whoosh, shoot his hair back, and then run back up on stage in order to try and cool himself off, because they were running around in 100-degree Oklahoma weather, and but they were great. They had a terrific band, and I think Brad Gillis might have been back in the band at that point. I'm not sure. Joel Huckster plays with them sometimes, and Joel's a fantastic, one of my favorite rock guitar players. But a great band, and there's a drummer that sings, Kelly Keeg, right? So Kelly, we've done some. Or I like Kelly. So anyhow, I have strong memories of watching those guys play. What else about that gig can I tell you? Oh, we had many malfunctions, but pot lights, flash pots that blew off at the wrong time, and the mirror ball came down at the wrong time. When I was trying to do my Hold On acoustically, they had somebody's metronome from a click track thing on a feed that was coming back through my monitor on stage, and my monitor alone, that was going like tick, 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 tick. And I'm trying to play doodle-dee-dingle, doodle, doodle-dee-dingle, doodle. Music holds the secret. Tick, 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 tick. So it was like, okay, this is some concentric circle of hell, like, I'll survive.
Hey, Rick, we're considerate of your time. Jeanette has a honey-do list for you. You got to get back to your work. But next week's going to be 3 years since the passing of Eddie Van Halen. And one of the highlights of your touring career was the US Festival performance. We had Gilmore on the show earlier this spring when Triumph was releasing that 40th anniversary package. And he shared a story about you guys were playing, well, what was it? They were playing in Tampa, and then they had to fly right over to the US Festival. It was hot as hell. People were partying. You guys share your experience. One, if any experience with Eddie Van Halen. And two, that whole day of the US Festival. And three, put the rest of this rumor that you're possibly going to join the damn Yankees.
Okay. So, my memory of the US Festival, it was just another gig, but it was one where we flew across the country. We played with ZZ Top in Florida on a multi-act thing, and then flew across, and now we were going to have to do the South Festival gig, and we were on 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I felt like, Judas Priest was on before us, and Scorpions were on after us, and I was thinking, that's quite the sandwich to be in, But to mention Eddie, no, I didn't have any interaction with him at all in person ever in my life. But his legend, just the whole reputation of Eddie loomed so large. When I was getting ready, warming up to go on stage, and we were picking out the set list, and and we were only going to play for about an hour. And but I want the guitar solo. The guys wanted me to put the guitar solo in the show that would normally be in the middle of Rock and Roll Machine. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to do a guitar solo on the same stage that Eddie Van Halen is going to be on shortly, within a couple hours. And I went, I sure hope I have a good day, because, the most important electric rock guitar player on the planet Earth is going to be up here later. And, so in a way it was like, psychologically, Eddie was kicking my ass. They were in their compound partying hard,
Yeah.
And Valerie Bertinelli was his wife. And so, the Hollywood film and TV actors and actresses were coming and going. And David was in his glory. They had press conferences, and, a lot of party favors had been consumed in different ways. So, it was a pretty crazy day, but, we were just doing all business. We were just trying to make sure that we kept our heads down and played a good show. And I wanted to, I did have a good day that day. I managed to, and I do thank Eddie for the fact that it was like, well, I knew he was going to be on that stage, and I thought, man, I better do something that, I can be proud of. I can't be Eddie Van Halen, but I can be me. So I'll try and be the best me that I can. And it worked out pretty good. Our Live at the US Festival DVD, it did all right. Now, the damn Yankees rumor, let me see. How shall I deal with this? I was going through a period where I'd left Triumph, and I put out a record on my own. But then the record label, Charisma, had gone bankrupt. And so I was kind of floating. Who knew what was going to happen in the States? So I started getting some calls, and part of it was because I think we'd shopped the Absolutely album, my Absolutely album, the first one I made when I left Triumph. We'd shopped that to John Kolodner at Geffen, and he passed on it, but then he knew that I was kind of out and around in the mix, and so he would start maybe recommending me to different bands or managers. And so I think Bud Prager had something to do with damn Yankees. I can't remember if that's the truth of it. But maybe he was maybe managing Ted, and then Ted was going to go into this damn Yankees thing, And they were just fishing around. Jack called me. Jack Blades called me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Tommy called, but I think Prager called me and Jack called me and said, hey, we're putting this band together. And I said, well, who's going to be in it? And he said, well, I got Tommy Shaw and I got Ted Nugent. And I go, wait, hold it. You already got more guitar players.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm stick Ted Nugent. I know that there's a sonic assault that's going to exist there. You don't need another guitar, And in any case, I didn't really want to be joining another band. Like, I'd had enough of bands. I wanted to be sort of, even if I was going to be living in a smaller world with smaller ambitions I wanted to sort of be my own boss and run my own house and not necessarily be partnered up with guys that already had a pretty strong understanding of how they were going to run their house and their partnerships and stuff. Like, I thought, man, what's it like when you're sitting around with Ted and you're talking about, the merch deal? What's Ted like when he's having those kinds of, does he keep a firearm on the table with those questions, So
it's sort of like a perfect example, less is more. Rochester, New York. You mentioned the Rock. Yeah, you've played the Rochester Auditorium, the Rochester War Memorial. I personally saw some of those shows. I saw you down at the old Rochester Festival tent. You were there. I think it was 87. It was a solo show. And I think you had, correct me if I'm wrong, did you have a girl saxophone player or something? Or am I?
I did. No, Colleen Allen, and she was fantastic. She was, what a breath of fresh air that was. I mean, I was looking to break the molds, right? So people thought of Rik Emmett Triumph when they thought of, a hard rock, big extravaganza. And so when I put a band together, I went, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a female sax player that can help sing high harmonies, that can, play sax lines and change the nature. And Colleen could play flute and soprano sax. And so, there was, you could get all these different voice things that would happen inside the music. And of course, the problem was that, I also added a second guitar player and a keyboard player. And by the time I was finished, 6-piece band, well, she needed her own room. And then the guys in the band were going, hey, I need my own room too. How come she gets her own room? You go, well, for obvious reasons, you idiots,
Yeah.
But, so it got too expensive. And eventually I had to let that band go. But she was great.
Well, I guess all that Young Street Bradors and hash oil didn't burn the Vernomatics' brain too much. So, hey, Rick, thank you for spending the hour with us. Again, the book, Lay It on the Line, A Backstage Past to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. I appreciate it, and let Walt bring this in for a landing. Thanks, my man.
Thanks, Fred.
So, Rick, before I let you go, one of the really good things that popped out of the book was I'm a massive New York Islanders hockey fan. I know you're a hockey fan, and it was candy to my mouth when I saw that you guys played Nassau Coliseum May of 1983, the day after they eliminated Wayne Gretzky and the Edmonton Oilers. So that was like, yeah, man, Rick was there. He got the vibe of Nassau and the Islanders.
Yeah, you can imagine. Never mind the building itself, the parking lot. There were some guys that they'd never gone home. They just stayed and partied. And then, we got tickets for Triumph. So they made it like a whole 2-day event. And it was something, man. It was usually when Triumph would play a building at the end of the night after the show was over, because we blew off so many flash bots and had flamethrowers and dry ice and stuff, and never mind the amount of dope that people in the seats would smoke. The building would be this hazy, foggy, thing after when we were leaving. But in this case, when we arrived there at the Long Island Coliseum, it was already, the smoke was already sort of wafting out of the windows and the doors of the place. And it was, the whole parking lot looked like people had been spilling beer and, taking a leak. It was crazy. But, and what a hockey team that was. Trottier, Bossy, and Potvin, the whole man. Like that was a great hockey team.
It's all come full circle for me, Rick. I was a 13-year-old boy, probably didn't go to school the next day, and here I am 40 years later talking to you about the gig that you played the day after. It's all come full circle. But Rik, this has been we could go on all day. The book is awesome. So where can we find all out about Rik Emmett and the book and everywhere about your information? Where can we find out about it?
Well, the book was published by ECW Press. So, they got a website and they got things. But of course, you can just go to Amazon and find the book, I do like, and the publishers like me to say this when I do this pitch, everybody, there's independent booksellers that are in and around your neighborhoods, and those mom and pop places, they require people to be community spirited if they're going to survive. So, it doesn't hurt to go down to your local bookstore, and if they don't have the book, say, hey, will you order me in a copy? And I'd like to get one for my uncle. Oh, and my cousin Jimmy. That would be a good thing, because I think the whole idea of the writing of books and the reading of books, in spite of the fact that we're in a digital age, I think it's still important to our humanity.
Well, Rik, this has been a great conversation, and we hope to speak to you again down the line, or maybe see you down in New York City or Rochester at some point, if you ever get the guitar out and get up to the Iridium and play, or somewhere like that.
All right, guys. Yeah. Don't hold your breath, but yeah, okay. But when my jazz guitar record comes out, get all the metalheads to buy it.
Sounds great.
We'll look for it.
All right, thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.